Q&A. Recording started. So there's a Q&A on the side just so that you can say hi, where you're calling from, and also ask questions. You can put your questions there and we'll answer them as best as we can after the speakers. So yeah, welcome everybody. We're just giving it another minute to let everybody in. Happy eclipse day. I don't know about all you, but I am definitely feeling the effects of this full moon very strongly. I think we're feeling it all in the world. And I just want to remind us all that this space, this idea of coming together is just for that, so that we can have a space to come together in community and speak and share and just have a space for conversation. So welcome again, everybody. I am Patricia Algara. I am the founder of Merequetengue Red. In collaboration with Mafe and Anita and a few others, we started this space, this Merequetengue Red, as a space for the Latinx folks in the profession to come together, meet each other, and know who we are, because I only knew like a handful of us, and I knew that there was more, and I really wanted to create that space so that we come together and can really highlight who we are, the work we're doing, meet each other, promote each other, etc. So it's been 5 years of that, and this time it has become very poignant that one of the most important things that we can be doing for our community, for all of us, is to speak about everything that's going on with this human rights blatant disregard of the Latinx community, and that coming together as community is a political act. That immigrants living in America are a dignified part of our society whose rights must be advocated for and protected. And so this collaboration started out as an idea that Anita brought to us when we gathered as Merequetengue, of like, we need to share some information about what's going on and how to protect ourselves, how to protect others, how to keep our community safe. So this conversation started, and it became a much larger network of landscape architects, designers, firms, professors, academia, and a lot of chapters of ASLA. So the local diversity, equity, and inclusion chapters of the Illinois, Arizona, New York, Maryland, New York, Upstate, and the Northern California chapters, as well as, and we'll be hearing from them today, members from TOPOPHYLA, TERREMOTO, and Bethany Rydmark Landscapes, Crown Landscapes, and really creating this space to learn about our constitutional and legal rights, to build acknowledgement, share resources, and support each other and others in these times of fear and uncertainty. The collaboration really flourished out of pouring all of our frustrations, insecurities, and our desire to be proactive into action by forming this collective of all the affiliate groups, chapters, firms, professors, and everyone that's here. And there's been a lot of us that have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make this happen and come together. So thank you everyone who has been a part of this. We will be sharing, Maria Landoni from Sur Landscape Architecture created a great summary, a visual summary of what was shared in webinar 1. And we'll be sending that later in the email, because it has all the information summarized in a really great way. So you'll be receiving that. And also, I want to remind you that this is a series. This is the second webinar out of 4. The next one is coming up on March 18th. So sign up for that. It's also going to be a great one. We're going to have Daisy Dominguez from ACLU, and she will be talking about our rights and how to, protect our rights. The next one, date still TBD, but it's going to be more of a role play. So thinking of similar of how we do fire drills and earthquake drills and all these things where like you really have to embody it and practice it and know where the exit route is and get out and all of that. So we're thinking of doing something similar to that where we can practice and embody how to do this thing. So TBD, we'll be sending that information soon. And we have a great panel together for you that I'm really honored and excited to share with you. So starting with Michelle Arevalos Franco, who is an assistant professor in landscape architecture at the Ohio State University. She's also the founder of Mas Común. She seeks to cultivate thriving social and ecological relations through the work of landscapes. Franco's research is informed by her Mexican roots and explores landscape architecture's dependence on Latin immigrant labor for construction and maintenance. The critical to this work is the integration of race, class, and knowledge stratification inherent to contemporary landscape architecture practice. Her work is both academic and activist, calling for institutional and individual reforms within the discipline. So we're super excited to have Michelle joining us today. We also have Adrienne Tannery. She is an artist, activist, and designer at TERREMOTO, where her work focuses on social and environmental justice, land black projects, and leading the test plot community land stewardship project at Debs Park. She earned her MLA at Cal Poly Pomona, where she co-taught the Collaborative for Healthy and Inclusive Learning Environment Studio. She's co-founder of the Climate Action Community and helped to establish the Black and LA Scholarship Fund. Her writing and illustrations have been published in the Los Angeles Review of Architecture, Curb Journal, and in School That Heal, Island Press. So excited to have Adrienne with us today. We also have Eric and Nahal from TOPOPHYLA. Now I'm getting confused on how to pronounce this. So Nahal Sobati is a landscape designer and co-founder of TOPOPHYLA. Her work engages ecological systems, graphic exploration, and community-based practice, positioning design as a tool for social and environmental advocacy through site-responsive strategies. And Eric Arneson, who is also founder of TOPOPHYLA, with a background in art and horticulture and experience using advanced documentation tools, he brings a thoughtful, innovative approach to problem solving, helping shape landscapes that respond to environmental systems, site context, and realities of construction. Eric is also the creative mind behind Pangea Express and Instagram, which you may follow. If you don't, you should. And it's just a really wonderful space where he comes up with the most creative, thoughtful, and perfectly funny memes about our profession and everything that's going on. So thrilled to have this panel with us today. They are all wonderful folks that are going to tell us about all the wonderful work they're doing. So I pass it on to Adrienne. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Patricia. We'll start with a land acknowledgement here, and we are looking at a screenshot of an interactive map of tribal communities connected as constellations by nativeland.ca. And we want to acknowledge the places our speakers today live, work, reside, and are tuning in from. Michelle in Columbus, Ohio, on the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miamia, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee nations, and myself in Los Angeles, and Eric and Nahal in Santa Barbara on the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Chumash, Gabrielino Tongva, Gabrielino Kizh, and Fernandino Tataviam bands of Mission Indians. And we want to acknowledge that we are guests on this land. And drawing from the essay, one of my favorite essays, Our Sacred Waters by Charles Sepulveda, where he writes, Kuyam is an indigenous theorization that disrupts the dialectic between native and settler through a Tongva understanding of non-natives as potential guests of the tribal people, and more importantly, of the land itself. Kuyam also disrupts the view of land and people as domesticable and instead understands place to be sacred and as having life beyond human interest. And this essay is linked in the resource we'll be sharing after the presentation. And we also we want to acknowledge this act of solidarity where Dakota and Lakota activists a couple weeks ago reclaimed this space outside the ICE headquarters in Minnesota, which is less than a mile from the site of Fort Snelling, where 1,600 Dakota were detained by the US settler colony in 1862, and also less than 5 miles away from where George Floyd, Renee Good, and Alex Preddy were murdered. So just acknowledging this is not a new to Trump condition of oppression. This is a longstanding condition of settler colonialism, and acknowledging the absolute critical importance of acting in solidarity with each other against this other colonial state. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrienne. Let me share my screen. Okay, thanks everyone for being here today. I wish I could see all of your faces. My name is Michelle Franco, and today I'm going to talk about my research, which has been ongoing for the past 5 years or so. I've been working on this topic, which is prickly and tangled, exuberant, and urgently growing of immigrant labor in landscape architecture work. And I think we're all here right now because attention to this topic seems more urgent than ever. So today I'll cover some of the critical understandings I've learned in my years of research, and then present in more detail a product of a recent project, a collaborative project with TERREMOTO and Reed Hildebrand called Jardineros. And I'll talk in detail about a pamphlet called Work in Progress that I hope will be useful to everyone here. So my interest in labor began in practice. I couldn't help but notice the racial stratification at play between the design office and the construction site and the garden. And this dynamic was really striking to me, as I'm sure to many of you. It was super visible, just undeniable. And I wanted to know if landscape architects were representing immigrant labor in their work, and if so, how. I wrote about this in my article, Invisible Labor, Precarity, Ethnic Division, and Transformative Representation in Landscape Architecture Work for Landscape Journal, and that was published in 2022. So here are a few of the main takeaways from this essay. First is that landscape architecture's alliance with architecture in the process of professionalization, so the move away from gardening, reinforced and still reinforces this division between intellectual and physical labor, and that plays out in fractures of class and race. For a profession which claims process as part of its domain, this division, this devaluation of labor is antithetical because labor is process. And so the embodied knowledge necessary to cultivate the ongoingness of landscapes is generally invisible, and those who hold it unseen and unacknowledged. In the United States, many landscape laborers are immigrants from Mexico and Central America. And then in states with high rates of immigration like California, Texas, and Florida, this share hovers at around 80%. The profits of landscape industries, which include landscape architecture, rely on a global precarious labor regime. So immigrant laborers are tasked with work that social scientists classify as the 3 Ds: dirty, demeaning, and dangerous. And there's little to no representation of immigrant laborers' work in the social, philosophical, or visual discourse of landscape architecture as a discipline. And representation matters. So while we, as landscape architects, may not have direct agency in larger political dynamics, we do have jurisdiction over drawing and agency over representing and reimagining the worlds created through design. So visual representation can lead to and is a necessary first step towards social representation, which would be inclusion, care, and being present in a community. And lastly, that other worlds are possible, that there are people out there working towards working differently. So that work, this research and essay was impactful for me, and I believe for the discipline. It's been read by many students and practitioners, and I hope that it continues to provoke conversation. After writing the piece, I wanted to work in a more direct and embodied way. So taking a cue from the research itself, I wanted to learn directly about and from the people with the embodied knowledge of building and maintaining landscapes. So then I began a kind of ethnographic, autoethnographic study by embedding myself into a crew of gardeners, of jardineros in Los Angeles. And this became the chapter called Migration and Maintenance, Mesoamerican Making of Landscapes in El Norte. It's in a book called Landscapes in the Making, put up by Dumbarton Oaks. So one goal of this work was to begin rendering the lived labor of migrant workers in jardineria. And I hope to highlight the central role of Mesoamerican laborers in the making of landscapes in El Norte in the United States. So documenting their contemporary contributions within the historical record so that those contributions weren't forgotten or left undocumented. In this project, I developed the concept of working at the scale of labor, which carries through in my current projects and pedagogy. And so here at the scale of labor, informal conversations, quiet activity, and shared goals emerge under the construct of shared physical work. And this physical context is really important because at this scale, the laborers are the experts. So then I wrote a piece for landscape research on the concept of care in landscape studies, which I'm sure you hear that word a lot. So that this essay is called Care's Repair, Landscapes Labor. And here I argue that this concept of care, which derives from feminist theory, in landscape architecture remains a sort of care washing that is mostly eco-technical and aesthetic. So in contrast, outside of landscape circles, care is human, it's political, it's affective, and it's a specific practice of social reproduction that's entangled in economic, political, and very direct human relations. So care in any conception necessitates this direct human connection, this cultivation of the human being. And I argue that to authentically claim care as part of the identity of landscape architecture, we must care unequivocally, actively for the human beings doing landscape work, rather than merely exercising an indirect caring for humans through caring for the environment. So this essay delves into the particular case of migrant laborers entering the United States under guest worker visas in the H-2B program. Landscaping is the #1 industry employing seasonal workers through the H-2B program, and Mexican nationals outnumber guest workers from all other nations combined. So in the most recent documentation, workers from Mexico accounted for 73% of total visas issued, with Jamaica coming in next at only 9.2%. And I highlight the extreme conditions of laboring under the guest worker program in the United States, drawing parallels to the fraught nature of guest worker programs globally. So you might be more familiar with the exploitation and abuse that occurs within these programs on mega construction projects in the Middle East. But guest workers in the United States often face similar antagonisms. And in this essay, Cares Repair, I start to draw out examples of how landscape architects could begin to cultivate care for landscape workers through the disciplinary and humanistic apparatus of the profession. And I realized that many of these steps were perfectly actionable, ready to test. And so I didn't want to continue just writing about it, but I wanted to see it happen. So then the project Jardineros was born, and this is a collaboration with the landscape firms TERREMOTO and Reed Hildebrand. And herein, we're taking an active approach to these very complex and thorny issues. And instead of letting them remain invisible, we're attempting to repair and renew our own practices as designers. And this happened through many conversations, workshops, and we constructed some alterations to typical means and methods of practice that we hoped allow for more collaboration with and acknowledgement for the work of immigrant laborers. And the project was meant to test and instigate new modes of working together across these boundaries of class, race, and social status. Throughout, I documented the work on film as it unfolds in the field and in the office, and I was embedded in both communities with designers and laborers. And so 5 short films emerged from this project, which I've been screening since last year. If you're interested in seeing them, we have an upcoming event this coming weekend, Sunday, March 8th in Fort Collins, Colorado. We'll be hosting a screening at the Lyric Cinema, joined by Adrian from TERREMOTO and Nuith from Reed Hildebrand, as well as a number of contractors and construction professionals. And we'll all be in this conversation, which is kind of novel and exciting and important. So I hope that if any of you are in the area, you can please join us. And so one important product that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail from the Jardineros project is this work in progress pamphlet. And this distills the applied research, communicates it in simple terms, and then provides clear direction on steps any landscape firm can take right now to invigorate greater co-creation between builders, gardeners, and designers. And so the pamphlet offers strategies on internal practices such as client education, communication, and design, as well as external practices such as contractor selection and dialogue, how to credit laborers, and the ongoing life of the project after construction. So I'll just go over a few of the pages. So here, we know that communicating with clients about the value and importance of laborers to the project can be tricky. Often clients are not aware of the antagonisms facing construction and landscape workers. And those antagonisms are the very same conditions of precarity that allow architectural work to operate at a lower price point for clients. So the reality of race and class stratification within architecture is at its most extreme between clients and laborers. And it's the job of the architect, who is in the position of intermediary, to advocate for laborers and educate the client. So here we offer a template letter that you can download to send to clients to express the firm's goals of valuing the skills and dignity of laborers and how that might affect the process and pricing of design and construction. Likewise, the selection of a contractor who also values laborers is critical. And whenever possible, it's important to work with contractors who you've built a relationship with over time, of course, and whose labor practices you understand. But often you need to seek a new contractor. And we've included a template letter here to ensure that their labor practices are aligned with your values. So the letter includes questions that cover these values and gain information about demographics, benefits and pay for employees, use of guest worker visas and relocation housing support for guest workers, as well as how many members of the management team are bilingual. So this should ignite a respectfully curious conversation and hopefully a long and fruitful working relationship between designers and contractors. So new models of communication are critical to increasing this kind of mutual and engaged collaboration on site, especially. So we've provided a communication checklist here Pre-construction meetings are important, very important to gain an understanding of how contractors and crews communicate with each other and with the design itself. So we provided some kind of template questions. How is design communicated to the crew? Who reviews drawings and translates details? Where is the crew from and which languages are spoken? Who are the core group of laborers and can we communicate directly with them? And then prior to this pre-construction meeting, request a bilingual foreman if the crew is Spanish speaking, request that key personnel from the crew are at the meeting, and that the meeting be bilingual. So included here are also key points for site visits throughout construction to create investment and engagement with the crew, such as introducing yourself, talking through design concepts and bringing drawings, models, and communication tools in English and Spanish, and allowing time to work in collaboration with the landscape architect as specified in your drawings. And then, of course, just getting to know laborers and thanking them for their work. So we hope that the pamphlet invites designers to design forms of increased agency and empowerment for the manual laborers we work with. The guidelines in the pamphlet support the cultivation of our work toward care, fulfillment, and justice. And so you can download from this QR code, or the link will be provided to all attendees, I think, after the webinar. And if you wanted a newsprint copy, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm happy to mail you one. And then I wanted to share one more item. I've been gathering signatures on an open letter to landscape architecture accreditation boards on the topic of immigrant landscape labor. And the letter includes the recommendation of Spanish language training for the education and licensure of landscape architects, as well as integration of knowledge regarding the economic and working conditions of construction workers, gardeners, and groundskeepers, the impacts and hazards of the work itself, and current statistics regarding the demographics of the landscape industry relevant to each state as part of the required training and education for landscape architects. So I would love your signature in support, and you can get to the letter and the form to sign through this QR code or get in touch with me. And then I'll just end here by saying that I've realized that through my research, which has come into being in increasingly dire and dreadful times for immigrants in this country, that our direct connection to immigrants' lives is one of the most important aspects of our work as landscape architects, and that through our process of creation, we can also create value, dignity, safety, and economic stability for a marginalized population. And this relationship between immigrant laborers and designers is not often thought of as part of the site of design, but inevitably it is. And how we conduct ourselves through our work and our working relationships is powerful. So thank you so much for listening. Happy to have a conversation.
Thank you, Professor Michelle Franco. Really appreciate the deep dive in understanding some of an evaluation of what it is that we currently see within the profession, and then also challenging those assumptions and finding a better way forward, particularly with acknowledging those who help make projects happen. This is a friendly reminder. If you have any questions, to please feel free to share them in the Q&A section. To start us off in this brief moment, we're going to spend about 10 minutes going through a couple of Q&A, and then we'll dive into the next group. I see that we have a comment from Diana Science. This reminds me of the work I did with the Inca Trail porters of the Inca Trail in Machu Picchu, which led to the creating of the Inca Trail porter law. I would like to share this process with you. Sounds like a wonderful opportunity for collaboration. Dr. Franco, in your eyes, what do you see is the first step for those who may not know how to even approach creating a space for dialogue with laborers? I can imagine that some firms might have trouble with even understanding how to begin that process. So what would you encourage
Yeah.
folks to be step one?
It may sound like a big ask, but I think learning Spanish is a big deal. And if you don't speak Spanish yet, it's going to be even more of a challenge to communicate on site with laborers who often are Spanish speakers, or even using Spanish as a third language rather than, their first or second language. So I think that is really, really important and really makes relationships possible and something that can be addressed and something that can be worked on. So I know some firms like TERREMOTO and others offer Spanish language learning within the office, and I think that's a really great initiative. So I would say Spanish speaking is super, super important. And I also actually believe that as because of the demographics of our industry, um, part of our education should be Spanish language training as part of accreditation of our programs in undergraduate and graduate training. So that's part of the letter that I shared. If you think about other professional disciplines such as medicine and law, it's usually required that you have a second language training so that you can fulfill and communicate with the needs of your population that you're serving. And I think landscape architecture, similarly, we should consider laborers as part of the public that we serve.
That's a beautiful point, and also the nuance of understanding our communities and our collaborators within the profession is really important. Laborers are not monolithic, that they are a diverse group, and dignity is due to all, not just those with a professional degree. Looks like Diana also added a line, any process that empowers workers is crucial. Awesome. Um, to looking at labor within the United States as a whole, are there any trends that you've noticed in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years that are worth noting to help inform where we've been and where we're going?
Mm. So I teach both undergrads and grad students, and so I kind of am lucky enough to be next to a lot of young people every day, and the way that they respect and value labor and workers is completely different than when I was in school. And so the conversations that we are having here and now, I think maybe weren't as frequent as they are now with younger generations. So I think that's like a very positive development. I think more people are willing to understand and recognize uh, that class stratification is real and that, like you say, every person deserves dignity and safety. So I think the conversations are some about labor and labor's value are somewhat easier to have, especially with younger generations. So that's exciting. One thing I would say is that right now there's a lot of attention, obviously, because of the political climate on immigrant laborers and in landscape work. And I hope, obviously, that this kind of like dreadful moment will pass. But I hope that the attention and the focus and the care that we're seeing happening, that doesn't pass, that remains, even when the urgency, hopefully the urgency fades. But I hope that the relationships and infrastructure that we are building will continue.
I think that that would be a wonderful thing, and I hope that's what the horizon brings. Like you said, uh, the generation today is different from what it was 10, 20 years ago, and these conversations are really important to have. Is there any strategies or activities or format of how to better create a space where these dialogues can happen as you went through this ethnographic study and exploration? Are there any high level, easy implementational things that we can start doing today, other than, obviously learning Spanish, but from your research that the average person, whether, you're not a principal, you're just an employee can start doing to make progress on this?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the things that we did at first, I think firms should start having conversations in the office about what they can manage, what they can do right now. And so any action is, of course, going to start with conversations first. So get those conversations, start having meetings about what do we do? What are we interested in? How can we move forward? I think that as much as possible, starting to implement and design into the kind of like typical day-to-day practices of the office, moments when you can spend time with laborers, either on site, before construction, even while you're designing. After the project is constructed, you can garden with the maintainers. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can connect. And I think thinking creatively about how to just spend time together, whether it's like physically working together. I think that is like an amazing bond that happens. And I highly recommend designers do that. But even just having lunch together or, walking the site together and talking and those kind of like informal situations where you're just next to each other, spending time together, I think are really beautiful and will pave the way for like enduring sort of um, relationships that grow over time.
Thank you so much. I think that one of the key pieces that you've shared with us is the humanity of it all, and to remember, like you said, uh, people make the places special, not just the design of the place. So with that, I'm going to transition and introduce
Thank
Adrian
you.
from TERREMOTO. Thank you. For those who have questions, please feel free to continue to add them to the chat and we'll answer them throughout the session. Adrian, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Thank you so much, Amina. And thank you, Michelle. Always love seeing you present your work. I just want to kick it off with really quick thank you to Merequetengue for organizing this. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you all. Thank you to Michelle and TOPOPHYLA for speaking. And everyone who showed up today, thank you for showing up. It really means a lot to see you all. Quick disclaimer, I'm not a professional organizer or expert in social justice. TERREMOTO's a design studio. We have done some things that you can also do, and I'm going to share them. But we haven't done everything. There's so much more to be done. We have so much more to learn. And I just want to say, like, we're always open to discussion and we want to hear where the gaps are. So let us know. So some of the things that we've done, I'm separating them into three categories, internal, visible, and site-specific. The internal actions, these are really critical, foundational. These lead to the ability to take these other actions, I think. And the goals are really just to improve your practice, improve your business, but also to normalize the valuing of labor. The visible actions, I'm gonna blast through these, but the goals are to encourage open conversations and public discourse, sway public opinion, hopefully, and take a position on something. I think these are still important, but they're really secondary to this foundational internal work. And then the site-specific actions are, these can be done in planning phase and during construction. These are more specific to responding to the threat of ice raids. And then the goals here are to cultivate healthy work environment within this high risk situation where ice is a threat, and really identify the vulnerabilities of your crew, of your project, and help put plans in place. So starting with internal, a few things we've done, we do. having open conversations with staff. This is a photo from our summer retreat, so we do this every summer, but we also do this on an as needed basis when emergencies happen in our community. This has to be, as much as possible, a non-hierarchical conversation with an emphasis on listening, where everybody has a seat at the table. It's an important opportunity to hear from your staff ideas on how to respond to these emergency situations. And it's important for folks in the room with more privilege to step back and really listen during these moments. Two is vetting potential clients. So we ask this question on our website when you email us, and most of the responses are supportive, but this is really helpful to set a precedent really early on with a client so that later on they can't say they don't get it or they don't support it because you've already addressed this at the beginning. Giving staff paid time to volunteer doing community defense. So we've had this volunteer option for like 5.5 years now. So for instance, if the local labor justice center needs folks to show up and do ice patrols, I can do that on the clock and I don't have to worry too much about using PTO. And this has been incredibly a wonderful thing. And then this is pretty big picture, but divest from fossil fuels and the military and prison industrial complexes in company 401ks if you're a business owner or if your partners are open to this. You can use fossilfreefunds.org. I'm sure there's many others to look into the accounts you're invested in and see what they are. If you haven't done this before, you'll probably be surprised. The typical investment package is not very cool, but there are ways to move this money around, and it's worth it to just take the time and just get this done. Then visible actions kind of speak for themselves, but just going through them real quick, like write and contribute to articles in press. We are trained to write project narratives. Use these skills to write about the issues you see in your community. Use your website as a space to address these things. So this is our website. We have projects, and then we have a land and labor page. Or create a website. Shout out to designdemands.labor.com. This was launched this week by a group, and it's awesome. It's really great. They have a lot of resources, statistics, data, debunking racist myths about immigrants and immigrant labor, and you can use this as a resource. Social media, I mean, this is pretty obvious. Instagram, you use it to your advantage. Beautiful project next to addressing issues and taking a stance on issues. And then public events. We've been doing this more and more recently. This summer, we raised $25K to cover lost wages for landscapers, maintenance workers, and community organizations. And you can use your office space, or if you can, I recommend using your office space. We used it to have an event to do a final push on the fundraiser, and printed shirts and sold them for the fundraiser. So just really get creative. Like, we're creative people, so use this to find ways to support. So site-specific actions, this is where I want to spend most time today. These are things we can do in the planning phase and during construction. I'm going to be speaking mostly about private residential projects where hopefully you already have a relationship with the contractor and crew and have already gone through the steps Michelle outlined in the work in progress pamphlet. But just obviously every project and every team is different. So I recommend talk to your people, talk to the contractors, talk to the clients, and see where the vulnerabilities are, come up with the interventions to lower the risk. This, I'm hoping, will just really give you a starting point. And we'd love to hear ideas for how to address these issues in public projects, of course. So build protective measures into your plans. Formalize these things. We're good at formalizing things, turning creative ideas and translating processes into plans. Add a Know Your Rights sheet. TOPOPHYLA has made these available. They're going to elaborate on these, I think. And call out locations in the plans. You can even make a separate sheet for this. Locked gate at the property boundary, porta potties within the private property line, rest area within the private property line. Rest area needs to have shade, seating, electrical outlets, ideally, so they electric stoves can be used. And so the crew doesn't feel like they have to go out on the street to eat their lunch. This was identified as a vulnerability with a crew I was working with. And then talk to the clients about what you're doing, the protocols, so that they understand early on you're building these into the construction process. If the client needs to hear that this will help ensure the project gets built on time and on budget, you can absolutely provide that data. Use design demands labor as a resource. But fortunately, I will say we haven't experienced clients pushing back against this. So I would go into it assuming they will be on board, but if you need them, the resources are there. And be the bridge. Like, more often than not, I see crews, they don't want to ask for things. So we ask, we're the designers, designed for crew welfare and safety in mind. And then when the project starts, Michelle already provided a lot of this, but I would just take 20 minutes to review these safety protocols at the beginning. You can hand out the resources. This will be linked in the resource we're sharing. The sheet, English and Spanish, and a few other languages are provided. Let them know the owner has confirmed that they will not let anyone on the site if ICE comes without a warrant. So you're taking out the guesswork so the crew doesn't have to wonder, do they have my back? What do we do if something happens? And you've helped them make a plan. And then confirm that they can have access to the site if they arrive there earlier than the workday starts. Typically, the morning commute starts way before rush hour, so they might arrive before the workday starts so that they're not sitting outside in their cars. If you can arrange to have the site unlocked for them, that's ideal. And then show them where the break area is that you're setting up so that they understand this is for them and you can use it as their disposal. And then acknowledge that we're taking these measures as a best practice to lower the risk for everyone so no one feels singled out. Typically, every crew has a pretty wide range of status. So just so we understand we're in this together. And then during construction, really try your best to avoid last minute changes. If the crew is scrambling to get something done or pick something up, they're more likely to take risks. So if they can have, a day or more to strategize, then they can send someone to the supply yard who's less vulnerable. So that really goes a long way. And then just in summary, every project is different. This is really for private residential properties. Please do create your own plans to address your own specific vulnerabilities once you find out what they are. And remember that you may not be able to address everything, of course, but the crew knowing that you're in this with them goes a really long way. And now I'll hand it off to Eric in the hall at TOPOPHYLA.
Okay, great. Can you see the slide? Perfect. Thank you so much, Adrian and Michelle, for your amazing presentation. And hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Let me move this somewhere. It's good. Yeah, so we have a lot to cover, so I'm just gonna jump in. This is us, TOPOPHYLA. We are a team of two, me and Eric. If you follow us on Instagram, we often share a lot about our process, things that we learn, and the work that we do. And we are very proud of our work and spaces that we create, not because they're great, but because of this journey that takes us there. And like all of us here, we are also very proud of, like all of us here, we all have the same vision to create meaningful places for everybody, that places that inspires and connect us to each other and to nature. But the part of the story is often untold, and that's none of these spaces that we are very proud of and we create could ever exist without labor forces. And these are the people that we often, work together. We solve problems together through this shared mission that we all have, all brain and sweat. Sorry, emotional. We create this bond that it becomes very personal to us. And whether it's nursery workers, delivery drivers, or masons, we owe all these great people a lot of respect and gratitude, regardless of their immigration status. And with all that said, labor rights is an issue in our profession, and it often goes unseen. So when we see scenes like that, it makes us really angry. And what's happening to immigrant communities, labor workers, for the sake of this talk, puts a very strong emotional weight on many of us. It impacts us personally, but it also impacts our profession and industry as a whole. Stress and fear does not create safe job sites or quality of work. And beyond its immoral nature, it affects logistics, costs, timeline, and ability to create any meaningful place at all. So as these angry designers, we get into this constant flood of news that takes us to it turns into paralysis. And over time, we feel powerless. And as a natural human response, we distance ourselves from what hurts, both mentally and physically. But there's another option, and that's really reaching out to our community and holding on to, channeling this anger into actions and really holding on to each other's strengths and build on each other's, abilities. And I can speak for ourselves that when it comes to advocacy and speaking out, when we start, we have no idea what we are going to do. But what we know is doing anything is better than doing nothing. And that's how we always start whatever advocacy we want to jump in. And we do think that we really need these causes more than, they need us. And with that, I will pass it to Eric to, talk about how we managed our frustration.
Yeah, thank you. So when the ice raids really amplified last June, and we were inundated, well, especially here in Southern California, we were inundated with horrible imagery and stories of people that we work with being impacted by what was happening. We're livid and furious and kind of paralyzed with anger and despair to some extent. Did a lot of venting in one initial case, we had some Instagram messages with Adrian, started venting together, and then we started talking about maybe some ideas that we can quickly act to meet the moment. So we're landscape architects. In reality, we have pretty limited impacts to what we can do on a job site, unfortunately. But one thing that we know we have absolute control over is what goes on our drawing sets and our plans. And something that really stuck with us that Adrian said was that we have guidelines such as tree protection plans for our drawings. Why don't we do something similar for the workers? And that's where we came with the collaborate. We did a collaboration with Adrian and TERREMOTO. Adrian touched on it previously, where we provided Know Your Rights documents. These are 8.5 by 11 sheets in English and Spanish that broadly cover workers' rights. Anita Bueno covered a lot of what is on these as well in the previous webinar that's on YouTube, so on the Merequetengue YouTube, so check that out. And by placing these on, for example, our cover sheet, we're essentially guaranteeing that this information is visible and available to workers on our job sites. This file, just want to give a thank you to Magdalena Aravena from Studio Siembra, who did the Spanish translation. Michelle, I do not know Spanish yet, but I'm working on it, so thank you for reminding me. So yeah, this file is pretty much based around California due to the nature of our projects, but it's also available as a Word file that can be downloaded. And the intention is that this file is a malleable asset that people can download on their own and adapt to where they need it in the United States. We also put together a full ArchD and E sheet that's intended to be slipped into a CAD file or a drawing set. And since we're landscape architects and not lawyers, we chose to rely on an existing resource from the California Collaborative of Immigrant Justice. And they put together this really wonderful toolkit that has a lot of information that covers guidelines and scripts of what to do in the event of an ICE raid and how contractors and crews can plan with their workers, as well as a graphic that helps identify judicial warrants and subpoenas. And this is a very helpful kind of asset to have on a job site so you can act. And then on these sheets, we also included an 8.5 by 11 private property sign that could be cut out and possibly laminated and posted at job site entrances to help clearly state where is private and public property. So both these ArchD and E sheets and the Know Your Rights documents are available for download. And Merequetengue can probably share that link after the presentation. So these raids have been happening nationwide. It's been a struggle for many of us to find ways to really stand against it. One organization that we know of is Architectural League of New York. They recently put out RFP for design action to better protect workers on a job site. The goal was to create a clear, scalable system to define boundaries, delineate private from public, communicate information, and strengthen industry-wide solidarity. And this got us thinking, we mock up materials, we prepare drawings before installs. Why don't we also mock up and prepare methods in which we can protect workers? We also design circulation, access, and wayfinding. Why can't we also do the same for our job sites to set clear boundaries and separate private from public? So we put together a proposal, and also in collaboration with Gabriel Castro Andrade. They were both selected, and we've been working the past few months to create a unified strategy together. So the strategy is called Red Line, and it's also by chance being announced today by the Architectural League of New York. So I'm excited to give a sneak peek about that. So the Red Line is a site access strategy that uses clear boundaries and scalable protocols and designated contact points to manage entry into construction sites. The visual language draws from the historical use of fabric and the color red as markers of visibility and collective action. Across cultures, the act of tying cloth often signifies the beginning of work, the acceptance of challenge, and also a shared declaration of intent. So The strategy is fairly simple. It includes a line which delineates the perimeter of a project boundary. So this is a simple material readily available, such as sisal rope, and then having red ribbons or flagging tape tied at a set interval. And then there's a worksite contact who is a designated individual from the project, the crew, that has been trained and has practiced the script of how to communicate and also identify and vet people that want to access the site. And they're also familiar with what a judicial warrant would look like and how to clear that if that person has authorization to enter the site. And then there is a designated contact zone, which is ideally away from the actual active construction activities of the project, so that this site work or the worksite contact can meet with whoever's looking to enter the site there and possibly neutralize any unnecessary confrontations or negative outcomes of that interaction. So the red line will be presented in more detail in Architectural League's website, and then also there will be rollouts on actual construction sites in New York coming soon. So really excited to see how that goes. So as creators, we also have many tools at our disposal. Adrian also alluded to these as well. Little things that we can do to cause good trouble. For example, we all have printers that we can use to print flyers and cards with information that can help educate the public. We also have many of us also have access to 3D printers, and in our offices or studios, we can use these to print things like whistles that we can share with the community. We highly recommend all firms and landscape architects, designers reach out to your local ice watch groups, reach out to your contractors, reach out to your nurseries, rock yards, anyone in your neighborhood to see if they need anything, mutual aid and things like that. We saw what was happening in Minnesota, and we saw how useful, for example, these whistles were in a lot of those videos to neutralize and kind of bring attention to what was happening. So we reached out to our local ice watch group, SB Resiste, and we asked them if they needed any whistles, and they said absolutely. So the next day we went out and printed as many as we could. We got 150 to them, and they now use these on their daily ice patrols. So this issue has become really personal to us, and it's been hard finding like the right, perfect way to act, but the only thing we're certain of is that no action is too small. And from what we've learned in places like Minnesota is that these communities were not protected by sweeping laws or powerful politicians, but instead they were protected by large groups of people in the community standing up for each other, often with actions of solidarity to reject the injustice that was happening. The truth is, if we cannot team up to address this deeply inhuman issue, how are we even expected to address more complex problems such as climate change, sea level rise, or biodiversity? I want to give a thank you to Merequetengue, Red, their wonderful group. Michelle, thank you. Adrian, TERREMOTO, also a big thank you to everyone attending. It gives us a lot of hope to see this many people coming out and care. So with that, I'll close out. We do have 2 more wonderful webinars coming up. The 4th one is TBD, but the next one on March 18th is on 3 p.m. Eastern time, and that's with Daisy Dominguez. She's an immigration attorney, and that'll be a really wonderful resource to kind of cover on a lot of the things that us as landscape architects are not versed and qualified to say. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adrian, Eric, Nahal. That was a very rich undertaking of what you guys are currently doing as firms to address what is I think we can all agree is a very human issue. Going to start off again. Remember, feel free to add questions in the chat, and we're going to take a few minutes and kind of discuss a little bit further some of the things that you guys are doing. Taylor Sorsa, excuse me, said, I can envision adding fencing or creating private property for a larger long-term construction project. Is there any advice when jobs are much smaller or for routine maintenance workers that you would have?
I think I'm happy to jump in on small projects. We do a lot of small projects. Most small private properties have a gate that you can lock. Like that's just how homes are set up. So I would definitely just start by having an open conversation with the owner about giving the crew access to the key and talking about why that's super important. Same goes for maintenance. If you have like a part in the conversation of maintenance, talk to the owner and see if they don't mind opening that up for them. It's just about reducing time spent in those vulnerable locations. Yeah.
If I may add, also, this is not necessarily just about our sites, but I think in general, like when you're walking on the street in the morning, like I do this, I'm walking my dog and I see some construction people in the neighborhood. I just always stop and say hi and like just, have that, like see them, welcome them, like just have them, like let them know that we're grateful for them, and just by acknowledging and saying hi, I think it goes a long way. If you can do it in Spanish, that's even better.
And also having like the know your rights cards handy, like in your purse or whatever you carry, is helpful because well, I don't speak fluent Spanish, but I have been able to approach crews, not our crews, but just in my neighborhood and um, establish, hey, I'm here as a friend just by handing them the cards. They're in Spanish, conoce sus derechos, and then they are like, oh, you're not here to like give us a ticket or something. You're here to help.
Tom Hurst has asked for Adrian, what has workers and crews leads feedback been to these efforts? Are you able to speak about the collaboration process you mentioned that yielded your list of actionable items?
Workers and crews leads feedback been to the collaboration process. Yeah, the collaboration process for us, for me, started with talking to the foreman. Because I already had a relationship, that was a good place to start. Bought him coffee and was like, "Hey, what are some things we can do better? Where are you still feeling nervous about showing up to the job?" Um, and and then the feedback. Yeah, the feedback has been just more generally everyone's in a better mood. Like we show up and they're like, okay, we got each other's backs. So far that's what it's mostly been. Thanks, Tom. I hope that was helpful.
Wonderful. Just to reemphasize what Patricia said and mentioned is really needing to change the way that we view our collaborators in construction, and folks are people, and we need to meet them where they are and lose the divide that we previously and systematically have had. Diane TERREMOTO has asked, any suggestions for language learning for construction? I used to be sort of conversationally fluent. Lost my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Amina. I was just putting in the link to answer that question because we have in the work in progress pamphlet a bilingual glossary for landscape work in those terms, just to get people started with it. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker, but I often don't know construction terms, right? So it is a particular language. So we do have a few pages of terms in there that could get you all started.
Excellent. And it looks like you shared the Google Drive link,
Yeah.
and I know I definitely need it. Thank you, everyone, for making resources so readily available. Moving on to the next question. Matt has asked, how can those of us in the supply chain best support this mission and facilitate these conversations? Matt, that might be something that we think on and explore in a future webinar or in a future email. Jonathan Giels, licensure is a big part of being a quote unquote landscape architect. But to your earlier point, public health, safety, and welfare are rooted in design, labor, and separation. What are your thoughts on how landscape architects can acknowledge that history while also advocating for our professional scope and rights within the design community, architects and engineers especially?
I wanted to add for the previous questions, and maybe Adrian is answering this already, but I know that there's a particular initiative called Design for Freedom at Grace Farms. That is a conference about kind of like forced labor in manufacturing for architectural and construction supplies. And so that might be a place to start in terms of supply chain issues. So I'll put the link in here. Um, to the question about professionalization, I think that's really complicated. Because the way that we have aligned ourselves with architecture and professionalization has been kind of a root cause of our distance from laborers. So I don't have a particular answer for everybody, but I do think some models of deprofessionalization are pretty provocative and interesting, and that we should take them seriously for an equitable future for everyone that we work with. So that might not be the answer that people want to hear as licensed professionals, but I think there's a lot to learn from those kind of movements.
Thank you, Michelle. Like I said, we don't have answers to a lot of things that we do. And, you're just happy that we are here to, just bring more questions to this, subject, and just having a conversation around it. I think it's the key.
Okay. Just taking a quick look at time. We have one last piece as part of this session. It's called Envision a Collaborative Network led by ASLA chapters. And so we're going to briefly hear from the chapters that have collaborated in helping to make this event possible, along with TERREMOTO, TOPOPHYLA, and others. We're working within our regions and each chapter to better understand what the needs are. And we'd like to share with you what we're doing thus far and hear about what you think can help strengthen our work. And so I'm going to hand it off to Victor with the Arizona chapter to briefly tell us what he and his chapter are currently working on.
Thank you, Amina. Victor Habib Sudani here with the Arizona. I'm the DEI chair for our chapter in our state. So a couple things we've been doing is we are setting up a DEI scholarship and grant program for students and emerging professionals. In this grant program, we're allocating money to help them with licensure. I know licensure has been a big topic, especially with the change in test and funding. So one, to help emerging professionals get licensed, and two, also for sending students to our national conventions and stuff. So that's big. We are big proponents in that. Another thing we're currently doing, we're setting up an acknowledgement page on our website highlighting work and people that promote DEI in either their life, their education, their research, or projects. We feel that that's a highlight that needs to be shown and shined upon. Then we have also teamed up with AIA and NOMA in Arizona to organize a few events a year to kind of get that cross-discipline connections going. These are just a few things in Arizona we're doing, and looking forward to hearing from all of our other state chapters and just people on what else we can do and be here as advocates to everybody in the community.
Yeah, I'll go next here. Javier from Illinois chapter. I'm the co-chair for the DEI committee along with Maria Villalobos. Our committee is about 1 year old. However, we've grown and accomplished a lot thanks to other JEDI and DEI committees from other ASLA chapters, some of them who are here today as well. They helped us and guided us as we develop our awards, our guidelines, and our resource list. Given the ongoing presence of ICE and Border Patrol officers in our region, one of the tools that we shared out was Tarjetas Rojas, which Adrian was alluding to earlier in our conversations. These are the red cards, which is a great tool for everyone to have so you can know your rights. This resource became available in our webpage. It became upfront right away, so everyone can access it right away. So we're continuously looking for resources to share to the chapter and also so we can have our community informed. And adding to this, this past year, our Illinois community started to partner with other organizations to be partners and allies that share those same goals and visions as us. And Merequetengue is a great example of this, of how we have the same goals and initiatives to make things like this webinar happen, bring it to a big audience and have the community informed. And I'll pass it over to Maryland chapter, Amina.
Thank you, Javier. The Maryland chapter, similar to Illinois, is relatively new. We started last summer and relaunched again at the very end of 2025 and beginning of 2026. We have several initiatives that we're currently running with, and I've got to just give a shout out to everyone who's on the committee because many hands make light work, and it's the passion and drive of every committee member that allows us to do this work. Starting somewhere is the first step, and that's okay. And so there are many things going on. The first one is we are conducting a survey to gather information about how landscape design and construction industry communities have been affected by intensified immigration enforcement. These questions will focus on how recent changes are impacting the dignity and safety of immigrant and marginalized workers, and we will be launching the survey at the end of March or the beginning of April to gather feedback based on experiences and concerns of both students and practitioners alike. And when we say practitioners, we're opening it up to everyone. So we're not limiting it just to the landscape architectural community, but opening it up to planning, contractors, architects, engineers. We don't want to limit feedback based on discipline or based on experience. In addition, we're going to use this information to inform the types of programs and initiatives and events and resources we can continue to collaborate and share with our community. Later this year, we are also working on a series of pocket guides, which is very exciting. And this will be specific either to the state of Maryland or to the Mid-Atlantic region. We're in the research process now and working on advancing that. There's going to be 3 versions of this. One is going to be geared towards employers, another to employees, and another to clients and owners. And what we're aiming to do is just to better educate and to consolidate information and resources that are available to the DMV area, and making it pocket-sized allows individuals who are on construction sites and walking around to just easily have that information readily available. We're aiming to launch this digital version around the time of the ASLA conference, so stay tuned. I'm going to now pass this over to Northern California chapter.
Thanks, Amina. Hi, everyone. I'm Sitlali, an emerging professional and member with the Northern California DEI Committee and a graduate student in Arizona. Within the Northern California ASLA chapter, we go by JEDI, which adds justice to equity, diversity, and inclusion. So for the past year, we have been hosting intimate listening circles that invite members to discuss challenges, joys, and goals we would like to see from the inside out. Recently, there has been concern that the government is not only threatening a labor force we work with, but also creating uncertainty for landscape professionals who depend on visas to continue living in their chosen communities. So some priorities we have now are expanding capacity with new members, publishing our action plan, organizing a conversation with lawyers for knowledge on visa acquisition, and updating resources on our webpage to spread the word about ongoing efforts by affiliate groups. And yeah, thank you. I'll pass it on to the New York chapter.
Well, I'll do the Upstate New York chapter. Um, so um, we are a pretty small chapter, and we're not particularly diverse up here in Upstate New York. So what was really important to us is reaching out to other ASLA chapters and other diversity, equity, and inclusion committees. Saying the words diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that we decided was a really important thing, and not to, as much as possible, to not to just dumb it down to 3 letters, because the words are meaningful and they're not convenient, but uh, nothing is convenient right now, and it's okay to like not be convenient. It's almost like a pushing back against this whole culture of urgency and convenience and efficiency, and sticking with things that actually land with our heart and that are important. So I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion chair for Upstate New York, and I first pitched this idea, of doing something because I felt so isolated and alone up in here. 3 years ago, we did a member survey, and out of all of our membership that identified themselves with some kind of ethnic or race, half of the membership didn't self-identify, but from the self-identified folks, there were 2 people self-identified as Black and 1 as mixed race, and I was the one that checked the mixed race box. So that tells you what's happening up in here. So what I found was really important was reaching out and finding the community, finding the people that are our allies. And so we're focused on how to be a good ally and how to support your neighbors, your contractors, your coworkers, people who may or may not actually be feeling at risk, and then they have the opportunity to step forward uh, and speak and stand up and say things for the people that are at risk. That, and then having listening sessions, active listening, practicing self-regulation, practicing embodiment, uh, and how to stand in your peace while the world is getting chaotic around you. Um, I think those are skill sets that we don't often validate or uh, make important enough, but it's the foundation to everything else that we're doing. So that's where I thought uh, my work lies, and so that's what we're doing in Upstate New York. Um, and then, was that everybody?
It looks like I'm going to just briefly highlight New York chapter. I think folks might have had other. Um, the New York chapter is very active and has a wonderfully robust website, which includes many resources, and they're actively updating them. They also are highlighting BIPOC dialogue webinar series that they have on a pretty regular basis, which is wonderful, and highlights local designers within the community. Just taking a quick look at time. Before we move on, I just want to once again thank all of our speakers. So Professor Franco, Adrian, Eric, Nahal, everyone, thank you again for sharing your experiences and your expertise. It looks like in the last few minutes, we had the opportunity to talk about resources and whether there's any suggestion of resources out there or things that need to be created to help support our communities. Feel free to use the Q&A to provide feedback. Let's see if there's any other questions in the chat.
And I want to thank our moderator for a lovely job.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. It's Ramadan, so I haven't eaten all day, and I do apologize if I've been scatterbrained.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan Mubarak to you too. As we're waiting for more resources to come in, I do want to highlight a question from Anonymous. How can ASLA chapters get involved, support the work these other chapters are doing? Can other chapters join this coalition? Yes. The more the merrier. I'm going to open it up to others to weigh in.
Yes, I would agree with you. Anyone's welcome to join. If you're somewhere where you don't have a DEI committee, I would say start your DEI committee. And if you need those resources or guidance as to how to start it, you can reach out to us here today because we're be happy to help you. I know our DEI committee here in Illinois, as mentioned, is a year old, but we've done a lot thanks to the help of all these organizations here today.
There is a base camp as well for the national uh, that basically our national ASLA kind of oversights that kind of connects a lot of the states as well. So if you do start one, just reach out to anybody on this panel and we can get you involved in the email chain and everything because there will be looks like there's going to be events coming up in the next national conference.
And on that note, Victor, I just want to add and repeat this again. We are going to follow up with a spreadsheet that we have been gathering, like all of us here in this call, the firms, the local chapters, and El Merequetengue. So we are going to share all that information with all of you and include also contacts from the local chapters so you can reach out. We are also going to send you all the recordings from this webinar and the first one, and a summary that Maria Londoni put together about the first webinar. So stay tuned because we are going to follow up with all the resources. And the spreadsheet includes all the resources mentioned by TOPOPHYLA, Michelle, and TERREMOTO. So thank you so much for being open to share.
Well, to close, I just want to thank everyone again. Such a wonderful job. And I think Anita put it really well. Just a reminder of like, stay grounded in the midst of everything that's happening. Keep breathing. We're here together. We're in community. This is the most important thing that we're doing right now, coming together, sharing, knowing that we're not alone, knowing that we have each other's backs. And this is not the time to play small. This is the time to show up in the ways that you feel are safe and that you can do so within your families, your communities, your network, your the places that feel right, and continue shining. Like be the brightest light that you can be right now. We need you shining. We need all of us to be those beacons of light in our community. So thank you so much to everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we have one more next week, so come again. Two more. We have two more, yes, but one next week and the other one TBD. Thank you.
Thank you.